Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. This week, we begin the reading of Masaaki-sama's sacred word from the 2022 Harvest Thanksgiving service. In this sacred word titled Meishu-sama in Music, Masaaki-sama shows us Meishu-sama's vision for music and the divine mission we have, serving in this pillar of salvation. In this sacred word, Masaaki-sama lays out a path for us how to truly serve Meishu-sama from here on. This week, we will begin by looking at the church purification, its meaning, the blessing we have received from it, and we will also reflect on our own attitudes up to now and how we must go forward, not only regarding the purification, but also the construction of the sacred grounds and our role in this glorious path of salvation. I'm really looking forward to receiving this sacred word with you, so stay tuned as we begin right after this. As we begin today's study, let us, in the name of Messiah, which is one with Meishu-sama, one with Jesus Christ, recognize that it is only by God's grace and Kyoshu-sama's permission that we are able to hold these studies. With hearts filled with gratitude for this permission, let us at this moment invite all our ancestors, the ancestors of all humanity, who live and breathe within each cell of our bodies, to participate in this study with us, acknowledging that the thoughts and feelings we feel and experience during this study are the very thoughts and feelings that God has already atoned for and forgiven with the atoning blood of Christ. So, in the name of Messiah, let us together with them return to heaven as ones who have been forgiven and saved. Let us begin our study with the church canon. Church canon. With great fear of God, we acknowledge that the Lord God is our true Father, the one and only God. We revere Meishu-sama as the model for all humanity and as our own example to follow. Meishu-sama, who was born anew as a true child of God the Messiah by receiving the divine will that God accomplished in heaven. We believe that Jesus Christ, who 2,000 years ago embodied the name of Messiah, the name most holy and high, is serving the Lord God in unity with Meishu-sama. And we regard the sacred word of Kyoshu-sama, who reveals to us the will of Meishu-sama in this material world, as a sole, absolute, and irreplaceable foundation in advancing our mission here on earth. Words of prayer. God, I acknowledge that you are alive. Within me, you are alive. I thank you for nurturing me to be newly born as your child. May this blessing be shared with all. In the name of Messiah, which is one with Meishu-sama, I surrender myself to you. Please use me as you wish. Thank you very much. For all those of you watching who have not yet become followers of our church's Instagram page, this is a great time to do so. All you have to do is open Instagram on your phone. Search for World Church of Messiah. Once the page opens, below the name of the page, you will see the button to follow. Click on it. But it doesn't end there. On the top right-hand corner of your page, there is a bell sign. Click on it and turn on all notifications. By turning on notifications, you will be able to receive in real time all notifications regarding new posts that are coming to the page. This is a great way to align our sonin and our hearts with the holy seed of Kyoshu on a daily basis. Through the Instagram page and Facebook, it is also a great way to see how our church is bringing this gospel of salvation to the world. Through the three pillars of salvation: prayer, food, and music. These are truly great posts, and there's so much that we can learn and so much that we can share with our family and friends. They are a true treasure. So don't forget to share. This week, I have several posts from Instagram, and the reason is it's very hard to read them separately. I think that we have to read them together and get the whole picture of this post. And they come from the book of Romans. So it's quoted from the Bible, and I like to share them with you today. So, post one comes from Romans chapter 1, verses 20 through 21. And it begins with, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. Their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened." The second post is from Romans verses 22 through 24. "Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like immortal human beings, and birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore, God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another." Post 3, verses 26 through 27 continues. "God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their error." Post number 4, 28 through 31. "And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a depraved mind to do those things that are not proper, people having been filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, and evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unfeeling, and unmerciful." And the final verse is from chapter 2, verse 1. "You therefore have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else, for at whatever point you judge another, you are condemning yourself, because you who have passed judgment do the same things." So this is a very deep, right? Very dense, intense portion of the Bible quoted here that we read today. And one observation that I like to make, two observations, right? This deviation from God, us not acknowledging, not glorifying God, turning our hearts away to God, away from God, has led us to live in such a world full of misery, conflict, disease, right? Sometimes people ask, well, if God is God, why is he allowing this? Why would he permit that? Right? But if you look as it's written here, as we just saw, and just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a depraved mind, to do those things that are not proper. People having been filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, and evil. It's not God's fault, right? We tend to want to blame God for everything, right? But it is our own choices that we've made of not acknowledging God, not acknowledging God's ways, turning away from God. This sin that we committed drove us to live such a life of unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, and evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, right? Malice, right? People full of gossips and slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unfeeling, and unmerciful. And it's easy to take this first part of this sacred word and start pointing fingers, right? Start judging. But in no way is this to judge a certain group of people or a certain, it's all of us. All of us. So much so that we see here in chapter 2. You therefore have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else. For at whatever point you judge another, you are condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment do the same things. We lived in this way because we and every single one of us lived in this way. We needed to be forgiven, right? And I think this is a very important point, that as we read the sacred word today, as we look at the church purification, one thing that is important for us to reflect on is our postures and our attitudes, right? As we're going to see, and one point that really caught my attention during this sacred word is when Masaaki-sama talks about this becoming light. How do we turn this into light? Right? How do you flip this situation that's so upside down right now? Right? In my own words, to put it in my words. So I'm really looking forward for us to receiving this sacred word together, but keeping this in mind, right? The world is in the state it is because we deviated from God, right? And God, out of his mercy, out of his love, is trying to bring us back, trying to awaken us back to his ways. And with that, I like to begin reading the sacred word from Masaaki-sama, Meishu-sama, in music. This is from the Harvest Thanksgiving service on December 1st, 2022. Masaaki-sama begins the sacred word. Hello, everyone. If the service becomes long and you want to go to the restroom, please don't hesitate. And if you need any assistance with something, the staff is here, so feel free to relax as you listen. With today being the Harvest Thanksgiving service, you can see here the vegetables lined up. And there are also grains of rice. In these times of convenience, I might say, the World Church of Messiah farmers who produce these are taking great pains to do so without pesticide or fertilizers. Although the Harvest Thanksgiving service is, of course, for expressing our gratitude to God, I would also like to thank at this time, and together with all of you, the farmers who are trying to respond to Meishu-sama's will of nature farming. And as Meishu-sama speaks about the importance of food, I hope that from here on to, if possible, people who do nature farming can increase and that it can be passed down and continued. Now, with this year coming to an end, with only a month to go, we automatically look back on the year. And this year, the grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of the Messiah took place. This was, of course, possible because of Meishu-sama's will, Kyoshu-sama's will, and the mobilization of all your efforts. But I was thinking about it again, and it was actually possible because of the situation we refer to as the church purification that arose. If the church purification had not happened, World Church of Messiah would not have resurrected, and the grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of the Messiah would not have taken place. This is just making a quick pause, right? Because this is really, really important. This was tremendous happening that took place, right? The grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of Messiah took place back in 2022. And maybe many of you watching here today had the opportunity to participate. But as Masaaki-sama will share and is sharing with us here, and we'll go deeper, this was only possible because the church purification took place. And what does he mean by that? He says, when we think about it like this, the way Meishu-sama makes things occur is mysterious, isn't it? As such, if we are able to respond to Meishu-sama's wish because of the church purification, then in the end, we have to give thanks to the church purification and to Meishu-sama, who made the church purification happen. Just making a quick observation here, right? Because I believe many who, during the church purification, who were involved, maybe didn't have this kind of mindset at the time, right? That this was actually something to be grateful for. Did you? I mean, if you had, if you didn't have, share in the comments, right? Share with us. How was your take? And how are you seeing now receiving this sacred work from Masaaki-sama? And Masaaki-sama continues. He says, of course, at first glance, the purification was not a good thing. So I believe you feel difficulty of giving thanks to it. But through it, we were able to hold the grand ceremony to celebrate the birth of the Messiah. So I believe it was truly a blessing. Also, as it was said in Kyoshu-sama's opening prayer today, finally, from here on, let us, as World Church of Messiah, materialize the construction of sacred grounds by our own hands. Of course, this too is coming to fruition from the currents of the church purification. Now, while we say we are going to construct World Church of Messiah's sacred grounds from here on, they are the sacred grounds that we had come to be familiar with. And we are holding a service on one of them today, too. I have been wondering what kind of thoughts we have now regarding these sacred grounds. Well, I'm talking about the trial and such, which is a different issue. But in regard to our own faith, how are we accepting this? We have been familiar with these sacred grounds for many years. So there may be some of you who have a kind of, how would I say, personal attachment to them and the efforts you put into it, all the memories you hold, those kinds of matters. Of course, it is fact that the sacred grounds exist because of all your efforts until today. However, in our constructing new sacred grounds from here on, how will we proceed? With an attitude of let's do it, or with a vague one of lingering feelings from before? This is my point. And I believe this is very relevant, right, for all of us right now, as we are experiencing these this past year, during this year, last year, the sacred ground of soil was born, was consecrated. This year, the sacred ground of fire was consecrated. Then, in a few weeks, the sacred ground of water in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, will be consecrated. This is huge, right? I believe that there are some of us who might still be having these lingering feelings. Actually, I can say for sure, as I've heard some people say, right? They miss the old sacred grounds, or it would have been nice to go visit those sacred grounds. Um, Interesting enough, I just had a conversation with one person who last year, I believe, was in Japan and ended up visiting one of these old sacred grounds, right? What we used to consider sacred grounds. And it was interesting in her observation. She said she didn't feel it as a sacred grounds anymore. It felt like an empty place, right? And I think that is a very rich experience for us to recognize one, what makes the sacred grounds sacred, right? Without Meishu-sama there, without Kyoshu-sama's approval, Sone, without Kyoshu-sama, who is the one that actually consecrates the sacred ground, it is just a garden, right? But here, Masaaki-sama is bringing us to look deeper, right? What kind of posture, what kind of attitude are we going to move from here on? How are we seeing the sacred grounds? How are we seeing the church? Do we have these lingering feelings from before? Or are we moving on full steam? Let's do it. Let's make it happen. It's a very big difference, right? And he says, and of course, it might be rather difficult to simply move forward without hesitation, giving thanks to the church purification and saying we will construct a new sacred ground. I mean, it is unfortunate for sure. And when I say unfortunate, I don't at all mean it as in too bad we can't go there anymore or the like. In a word, seeing that sacred grounds, places that Meishu-sama poured his heart and soul into, are being maintained by those kinds of people is an unfortunate situation. It is certainly unfortunate, isn't it? I think so too. But putting that aside, we really just have to thank Meishu-sama for everything that has happened up until this point related to the sacred grounds. What does this mean exactly? In Sekai Kyosei-kyo, it is stipulated that Kyoshu-sama is the symbol of the unity of all the members. That is how it is written in the bylaws of Sekai Kyosei-kyo, the symbol of the unity of all the members. Then, I was wondering what unity meant. Of course, I had a vague idea about it, but when I looked it up in the dictionary, it said, state of two or more parts being united or combined into one, as of the parts of the whole, of a whole. So, what does it mean to be the symbol of the unity of all the members? There are all of you, the members. And of course, there are two or more of you. So Kyoshu-sama is an existence made up of all of you, the tens of thousands of Seikaikyu Seikyo members combined into one. And to be a symbol means that he is an embodiment. In other words, Kyoshu-sama is one human being named Yoichi Okada. But when he is Kyoshu Yoichi Okada, all the members are combined into one within Yoichi Okada Kyoshu-sama. This is a huge, important point for us to reflect, right? We have Yoichi Okada, but who is one human being. But when he is Kyoshu Yoichi Okada, all the members are combined into one within Yoichi Okada Kyoshu-sama, right? It's not just a title or a position, administrative position, as many might want to put it. Masaaki-sama continues and he shares, the Emperor of Japan is what we call the symbol of the unity of the people of Japan. And the people of Japan are combined into one within him. And daily he offers prayers, for example, for our sake. Kyoshu-sama is the same, the symbol of the unity of all the members. He is certainly a symbol, right? I mean, Kyoshu-sama isn't going to suddenly divide into some tens of thousands of individual people. Rather, within the one individual Kyoshu-sama, all the members of Seikaikyu Seikyo dwell. That is why symbol is used. Of course, there are all kinds of religions in the world, and I believe that their thinking regarding their central figure, the spiritual leader, if you will, varies from religion to religion. But at the very least, at Seikaikyu Seikyo, as it is stipulated, Kyoshu-sama is the symbol of the unity of all the members. All the members are united to Kyoshu-sama. This includes myself, as I too am a member. Well, to be more exact, my membership was apparently taken away. Everyone laughs. And the same happened to some of the people sitting in the front row. Everyone laughs. Editorial note, Seikaikyu Seikyo revoked membership from Masaaki-sama and other leaders, some of whom were present in the congregation that day for standing up for Kyoshu-sama. Putting that aside, at any rate, we are all united to Kyoshu-sama. And if that is the case, then to do something to this Kyoshu-sama is to do the same thing to all the members. That is to say, this isn't simply just a matter of Kyoshu-sama being secretly followed and filmed and us saying, what a terrible thing they did to Kyoshu-sama. That's because in Seikaikyu Seikyo, it is stipulated that Kyoshu-sama is the symbol of the unity of all the members. So those acts were against you and all the members too. So just taking a quick pause here, right? So this is back in 2022, and I heard a comment of recently somebody saying, well, that was then, and we heard so much about the church purification over and over and over. And it's like, well, let's get over it, right? But I don't think we truly comprehended what was happening. What happened, to be very sincere? There's actually many people in the world today that still do not comprehend what actually happened, right? And one of the biggest things that was used during the church purification at that time was, from the other side, was saying, well, this is something that's happening in Japan between Kyoshu-sama and directors. Don't worry about it here overseas. Just focus on going to church. Just focus on giving Jorei. You don't have to worry about any of that, right? But here, Masaaki-sama is showing us it's not that simple, right? It's not just about what a terrible thing they did to Kyoshu-sama and hammering on that point, right? It's really a wake-up call to realize Kyoshu-sama is the symbol of members, the unity of the members. Then anything that happens to Kyoshu-sama is happening to the entire membership, all of Meishu-sama's members, to the entire church, right? It's not an individual problem between Kyoshu-sama and directors, let's say, right? And this is key. I believe we really need to stop for a second and recognize that, realize that, right? And he continues, but I believe those people would justify their actions by saying that it was because Kyoshu-sama violated the teachings of Meishu-sama. And if that is the case, it means that when someone does not act the way they want that person to, their solution is not to open up a dialogue. Rather, their idea of a solution is to gather what they believe to be unwelcome information for the other person and use that information as a threat to keep him or her quiet. To have done that against Kyoshu-sama means to have done it against all the members. It is with that kind of mindset that those people are facing all the members of Sekai Kyusei-kyo. So those pieces of land that those people maintain, can they be sacred grounds? No way. But we believed that the executives and Kyoshu-sama became one, and we're going to go forward, protecting the divine work of Meishu-sama and the sacred grounds. The so-called executives harbored some unthinkable thoughts toward Kyoshu-sama. As Kyoshu-sama is the symbol of the unity of all the members, the thoughts harbored against Kyoshu-sama are thoughts harbored against all the members. So if I weren't aware of the secretly following and filming, it would have been a lot worse. There's absolutely no way that Meishu-sama would say of the place maintained by those kinds of people, this here is sacred ground. It is sacred. There's no way. So through the church purification, we came to know this truth. This is something we can be truly grateful for. This is something we can be truly grateful for. In the first place, to expel Kyoshu-sama, who is the unity of all the members, is just plain suicide. I mean, to kick out Kyoshu-sama is to kick out all the members. And that's because it is Kyoshu-sama alone who embodies all the members. And I'm pretty sure that the person Sekai Kyusei-kyo considers to be their current Kyoshu is not expected to take on this world. Editorial note: the current Kyoshu-sama of Sekai Kyusei-kyo is Nobuyuki Watase, who took on the name Nobuyuki Okada without permission from the Okada family, even though he has no relation to the Okada family. As you know, he does not speak in front of the members. So if this new Kyoshu-sama has not taken on the role to be the symbol of the unity of all the members, and if they kicked out the true Kyoshu-sama, then Sekai Kyusei-kyo is simply a hollow shell. No matter how you look at it, it is a hollow shell. It would only be a group of people that presume they believe in Meishu-sama and nothing more. But for us who are allowed to be together with Kyoshu-sama, the symbol of the unity of all the members, we are not a hollow shell. Of course, if it were not stipulated that Kyoshu-sama is the symbol of the unity of all the members, then there wouldn't have been any issues. But in Sekai Kyuseikyo, Kyoshu-sama is stipulated as the symbol of the unity of all the members. So if you were expelled, no one would be left there. It would be a hollow shell. Even if there were pieces of land called sacred grounds, there's no meaning to them. So I'm just making a quick pause here, right? Because as we've been through this church purification, more and more, we are being taught and shown and guided to seek and truly understand who Kyoshu-sama is. Right? What does it mean to be connected to Kyoshu-sama? What does it mean to have the permission to follow Meishu-sama's church, to be considered a member of Meishu-sama under the leadership of Kyoshu-sama? Without Kyoshu-sama, there is no church. There is no connection to Meishu-sama. And this is in so many levels. And here, Masaaki-sama is showing us, right, this direct relation between Kyoshu-sama and the members. And how, without Kyoshu-sama, it's just an empty shell. And going back to that episode I shared with you a little bit earlier during the study, literally, that is a sensation people have had stepping on those grounds. It's literally hollow, empty. That feeling, that magical sensation that used to be there no longer is. However, when you go to wherever Kyoshu-sama is, be it at a meeting, grand service in a hotel, right, in a hall for the hotels where they're being carried out, or at the churches in Japan, meeting with Kyoshu-sama, that place where Kyoshu-sama is truly sacred. And that sensation of sacred grounds fills us up, right? You can feel that. You can experience that. And like Masaaki-sama says, for that very reason, right? Because Kyoshu-sama is there, we are not hollow in that sense. And he continues. Masaaki-sama looks at the program. It is written in today's Bible verse from the book of Ephesians, chapter 5, verses 1 through 21. No one who is immoral, indecent, or greedy, for greed is a form of idolatry, will ever receive a share in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Do not let anyone deceive you with foolish words. It is because of these very things that God's anger will come upon those who do not obey him. So have nothing at all to do with such people. You yourselves used to be in the darkness, but since you have become the Lord's people, you are in the light. So you must live like people who belong to the light, for it is the light that brings a rich harvest of every kind of goodness, righteousness, and truth. Try to learn what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the worthless things that people do, things that belong to the darkness. Instead, bring them out to the light. It is really too shameful even to talk about the things they do in secret. And when all things are brought out to the light, then their true nature is clearly revealed. For anyone that is clearly revealed becomes light. Ephesians chapter 5, verses 5 through 14. Masaaki-sama shares, it says Do not let anyone deceive you with foolish words. And it says, have nothing to do with the worthless things that people do, things that belong to the darkness, secretly following people or secretly listening in on them or secretly photographing or filming someone is an action done in secret, in the darkness, isn't it? So have nothing to do with it and instead bring them out to the light. You have to point it out to them. Hey, what you guys are doing is wrong. And here is a very key point, I believe, right? It really touches me and it answers that question that many people had. Why are we talking about this so much, right? And here it is, as we see from the Bible, you have to bring it out to the light. For when you bring it out to the light, it becomes light, right? But to do that, you have to point it out, right? As Masaaki-sama is sharing here, hey, what you guys are doing is wrong. And then he continues and he says, quoting, right? It is really too shameful even to talk about the things they do in secret. It is unpleasant to talk or hear about people secretly following and filming others, which those people actually did, isn't it? To put it into words feels shameful, right? And I believe many people had that sensation, right? This uncomfortable feeling during that period. Why is this being brought out? Why is this being talked? Or maybe even now, as you're watching today, why, right? But because it is truly uncomfortable, right? People have that sensation or that rejection to it. But Masaaki-sama continues, says, so have nothing at all to do with those kinds of people. This is obvious, right? But it says that ultimately, when all things are brought out to the light, then their true nature is clearly revealed. For anything that is clearly revealed becomes light. What does this mean? Needless to say, we will have nothing to do with people who do those kinds of things. But that doesn't mean that we will judge ourselves as good and those other people as evil or say that side is evil. When their dark acts are revealed by the light, if we do that, those things will never become light. Here's the key point, right? The whole purpose of bringing this out into the light, as Masaaki-sama is sharing, is to make it become light, right? How do you take that situation and change it? You can't change it if you go from the perspective of I'm good, they're bad, which is a very easy tendency for us human beings to do, is it not? We think I'm praying, I'm on the good side. Those people, they're doing this despicable things. They're on the bad side, right? And we end up judging. But Masaaki-sama says here, if we do that, those things will never become light. So what does it mean, right? To make it become light? Or how do you make it become light? Which is key here. He shares. Instead, we can say, their posture is actually my posture. This is it. In the root of their acts are postures like wanting to prioritize one's own interests or prioritizing material things. Don't we have those kinds of postures within us? Obviously, we do, right? So, if you say, God, you forgave this part of me, then God will say to you, that's right. I did forgive that part of you. That is light. To become light means to receive God's forgiveness. Guys, this is huge, right? To become light means to receive God's forgiveness. as I'm observing around me and those things that are taking place and actions that people are having around me, I need to acknowledge the proper attitude and posture toward God is I need to acknowledge that that exists in me too, right? And as Masaaki-sama is sharing here, right, at the root of what happened is this idea, this feeling of prioritizing one's own interests, prioritizing material things. None of us are exempt from that, are we? Right? And to become light is to acknowledge that before God and receive God's forgiveness. This is huge. Can't emphasize enough how moved I was when I read this, right? Because we might have this idea, oh, it became light, right? And you think, oh, maybe I'm meditating and I'm in heaven and I'm surrounded by light and it's all becoming light. That's not what's being shared, right? What's being shared is receive that forgiveness of God. Acknowledge that within you and receive that forgiveness of God. Masaaki-sama continues, he says, on the other hand, if you start saying that acts like that are justifiable, like those people are doing, or as long as you judge those acts like it is someone else's problem, then everything will remain in darkness. That's because you simply don't receive God's forgiveness. This is big, right? And we can see that with the church purification. We can see that with the world around us, right? When we see an issue in the world, problem in the world, something that really bugs us or troubles us, right? Some injustice that's taking place or some attitude, despicable attitude, right? If we look at that and one, we justify it, or we look at those things and we judge them as someone else's problem. That person's doing, that person did, right? It's a common thing that is constantly asked, right? Well, here I'm surrendering, I'm returning to God, but what happens to that person? How about that person that did this? And immediately our thought is going in that direction, right? Willingly or not, we are judging that situation from that point of view, right? That is the same as like I'm saying here. As long as you judge those acts like it's someone else's problem, then everything will remain in darkness. That's because you simply don't receive God's forgiveness. Right? It's not that person that's receiving God's forgiveness or not. That's between them and God eventually, right? This is about you. You who are observing that, you who are experiencing that, you and me, right? At that moment, are we going to receive God's forgiveness or not? Because if we don't, it remains in darkness. He says, those people have stopped at this is justifiable or we are not evil. But my hope is that one day they may come to the thinking that, God forgave those postures. He used me for that. What a terrible thing I did. After all, they were fellow believers of Meishu-sama, of the same Meishu-sama. So today I'm going to stop the reading here where we're at, but something for us to truly reflect on, right? Not only on how blessed we were with this church purification, how much God's plan is moving forward because of this church purification, right? The permission that we're having to construct the sacred grounds, to be a part of that, to serve under the leadership of Kyoshu-sama, who is one with Meishu-sama, is the living Meishu-sama, right? How blessed we truly are for that. And the bigger blessing I wouldn't say the bigger blessing, but also enormous blessing is to be able to see who we were, where we were, the world of darkness that we were trapped in, and now how we can turn all this into light by receiving the forgiveness of God. This is enormous, right? This removes the burden, that weight that we've been carrying for this whole time, all along. And it applies to everything in our lives, right? We are here to make everything become light. And through the church purification, we are learning that process. And now, in our daily lives, right, as we experience everything in the world, let us start focusing our eyes toward God. Instead of out judging the situation, judging the person, let us see, let us acknowledge that those thoughts, those attitudes, those postures, in essence, exist within us, and receive God's forgiveness that very moment and make it become light, right? Work for it to become light. Let's strive to serve our best. I'm really looking forward to the consecration ceremony that is coming up, right? And the amazing speed in which God is advancing. So let us return our old selves to God and serve with all our heart, all our soul, in one heart with Kyoshu-sama, one heart with Masaaki-sama, in the fulfillment of God's will. Thank you so much for joining us. May all honor, may all glory be returned to God always.